Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to continue with our reading lesson. If we fail to act, we will end up with a different planet. Our objectives for this part of the lesson are to explain how the author achieves credibility, to correct false statements, and to identify the type of text. Let's recall quickly, what do we mean by credibility? Credibility means believability. So when the author makes you believe what he or she is saying. When we talk about credibility, we can ask you, how do writers achieve credibility? So how did the author achieve credibility in this text? 1. Using real-life examples that makes you believe what he's saying. That makes it credible. 2. Data, numbers, and statistics. 3. Names of people or places. And facts, case studies, and researches. All these elements make the piece of writing credible. The other question would be, why do authors use real-life examples? So we can ask you, why did the writer resort to using real-life examples in this text? Or maybe case studies and researches and facts? Well, 1, of course, to achieve credibility. 2, to give the writing a touch of authenticity. And what do we mean by authenticity? It means realism. So the writing will seem real. And 3, to avoid prejudice, which means that the author is trying to avoid criticism. In the end, that's not the author's opinion, it's actually what happens in real life. Before we move on, let's recall some important details in the text and the section that we read last time. First of all, we know that Dr. Hansen, who is an expert on climate change, he has warned that Earth is being turned into a different planet, and if we do not take any serious measures or actions, we will end up with a different planet. 2. He's saying that we already have seen specific effects that actually are affecting our climate altogether. So there are already dangerous positive feedbacks which we said are negative effects. They are destructive effects that can increase the rate of climate change. And we also read about some possible effects of global warming, like rise of temperature, melting of the Arctic ice, sea level rises, loss or extinction of species, and release of methane gas, which we said is 20 times more dangerous and powerful than carbon dioxide. So now we're ready to move on. Let's move on and continue where we left off last time, paragraph number 7. If we go another 10 years, by 2015, at the current rate of growth of CO2 emissions, which is about 2% per year, the emissions in 2015 will be 35% larger than they were in 2000. Of course, this text was published in January 2007, and it was probably written 2 years before that. So it was written in 2005. And what the speaker is saying here is that in 10 years, meaning in 2015, based on the time that he was writing, he is saying that if people continue with their reckless actions and pollution continues to increase at the same rate, okay, which is 2% per year, then the emissions in 2015 will be 35% larger than they were in 2000. So what he's saying is that if the rate of CO2 emissions is going to keep on increasing more and more every year, 2%, then in 2015, so meaning after 10 years, it will be 35% more than what it was in the year 2000. But if we want to get on a scenario that keeps global temperature in the range that it's been in for the last million years, we would need to decrease the emissions by something of the order of 25% by the middle of the century, and by something like 75% by the end of the century. So what Dr. Hansen here is explaining is that if we want to think of the situation in a way where global temperatures stay in the same range as they've been in for the last million years, then we would have to decrease these emissions, these CO2 emissions, and we would have to decrease global warming, and we would have to decrease pollution and everything that's affecting the environment in a negative way by 25% by the middle of the century and 75% by the end of the century. So basically we would have to change a lot to decrease the amount of CO2 emissions in the environment. The continuing rise in carbon dioxide emissions and average global temperatures is on schedule to cause the eventual collapse of the ice sheets on both Greenland and the West Antarctic, with a catastrophic rise in sea levels. So, if these carbon dioxide emissions keep on increasing and rising, then the global temperature is going to keep on increasing, and that's going to eventually lead to the collapse or destruction of the ice sheets on both Greenland and the West Antarctic, and that's going to cause a catastrophic event, which is a disastrous rise in sea levels. If we follow business as usual and we don't get off this course where year by year we're getting larger and larger emissions of CO2, then we'll have large sea level rises this century, and I think that will become more apparent over the next decade or two, Dr. Hansen said. What Dr. Hansen here implies is that business should change. The nature of business should change. So businesses usually care about money. They don't really care about the environment, even though they produce a lot of pollution which affects global warming to a great extent. So what Dr. Hansen here is kind of like implying is that these businesses should also have environmental goals. We have seen some companies that have gone green, meaning that they have specific goals that address the environment. So they don't really only care about making money, they also care about the environment. The last time it was 3 degrees Celsius warmer, sea levels were 25 meters higher, plus or minus 10 meters. You'd not get that in 1 century, but you could get several meters in 1 century, he said. He also adds that when the temperature was 3 degrees Celsius more, so the temperature rose by 3 degrees Celsius, sea levels were 25 meters higher, either more or less by 10 meters. He's saying that, of course, this might not happen in 1 century, but we do get several meters in 1 century. So imagine 3 degrees Celsius warmer, okay? Sea levels were 25 meters higher. Can you imagine that? That's a lot. Can you imagine what's going to happen to those cities by the sea? Can you imagine these people living by the sea? What's going to happen to them? Half the people in the world live within 15 miles of a coastline. A large fraction of the major cities are on coastlines. So there you go. So a lot of the cities in the world are on coastlines, meaning by the beach or the sea. And the problem is that once you get the process started and well on the way, it's impossible to prevent it. That's why we need to address the issue before it gets out of control. So Dr. Hansen is still talking about the effects and the really dangerous effects that can take place if we do not do anything about this issue. So if global warming keeps on happening and the temperature keeps on rising, all these negative effects are going to affect every single one of us. And this problem is actually impossible to, if this happens, it's really impossible to prevent it. We cannot really do anything. So that's why he keeps on reminding us that we need to address the issue before it gets out of control, because once it's done, that's it. We cannot do anything. Many species of animals and plants are not going to cope with rising temperatures, which are causing isotherms, lines of equal temperature. So the word isotherms means lines of equal temperature, meaning that we will have different places with the same temperature to travel polewards, meaning towards the pole, at the rate of 50 kilometers a decade, compared with the average rate of species migration of 6 kilometers per decade. Those species at high latitudes have no place to go to. Many of them will be in trouble. They will effectively be pushed off the planet, Dr. Hansen said. So again, Dr. Hansen keeps talking about all the negative effects that will take place if no serious measures will happen. So a lot of animals and plants actually are going to die. They will not be able to cope with rising temperatures, meaning that they will not be able to adapt and keep up with the temperatures. Dr. Hansen, who last year received the WWF Duke of Edinburgh Conservation Medal, said that although he is now free to speak out, many other US government scientists feel gagged. So remember at the beginning of the text we said that he was gagged, meaning that he was prevented from speaking, but now he is free to speak out. And even though he has this chance, many US government scientists are not allowed to speak out. Well, that's something to think about, isn't it? Right? And a note here, migration, the word migration mentioned in paragraph 12. I think you are familiar with this term. It means the seasonal movement of animals from one region to another. So we know that specific species of animals move from one place to another when the season changes. And that's what migration means. In the end, your homework: answer the following questions in your own words, but referring to the text. Number 1, how does the writer of the above text achieve credibility? So you might want to go back to the beginning of the video and check the points that I mentioned. To what type of writing does the above text belong? Explain. So you might also here want to go back and check in previous videos or from your notes the different types of writing. And this one is actually pretty clear. You should not have any difficulty. The following statements are false. Rewrite them correctly. A. With global warming, the closer you are to the coastline, the safer your life will be. Species living in high and low latitudes will certainly receive equal danger. And C. If the temperature rises by 9 degrees Celsius, the sea levels will nearly be 50 meters high. So you need to go back and refer to the text. Thank you.